Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to another episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Maybe you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is an historian making their official debut here on the show. Now, my guest today is a Tudor historian whose work primarily focuses on the Tudor period. She has researched Anne Boleyn and her life for 10 years. She's currently studying for a history degree via the Open University whilst also writing her first book for Pen and Sword. Her first book will focus on the relationship between Mary I and Elizabeth I. She's also the creator of the podcast Herstory, focusing on the lives of women throughout history. And I am so excited to have this individual on the show. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to our guest today, historian and future author, Jessica Faulkner. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an utter pleasure to be here today.
Awesome, Jessica. I am so excited to have you here on the show. I've been following your content for a very long time, and it's such a huge joy to finally have you here on the show. And speaking of your content, for those that do not know Jessica, she's also the creator of the Unholy Tudor series on Instagram, where her whole page is dedicated to the Tudor history. Now, before we dive in, Jessica, there was one fan question that I had to ask you that one of my viewers wanted me to ask. This viewer would like to know, out of all of the Tudor histories that you have researched, what is the one piece of evidence that is, what's the word that he used, is overhyped too much in the Tudor histories?
That's a really good question. I think possibly that Elizabeth I is one of our greatest monarchs. Now, I'm not saying she's utterly terrible, nothing like that, but I think a lot of it gets put onto her, and like she's the reason why the whole of her era is excellent, when in fact you actually have William Cecil, who is her right-hand man, and in all honesty, he was the one that did all the state policies. And I think a lot of credit gets given to Elizabeth, and a lot of the men around Elizabeth who shaped her reign are forgotten. So I would say that maybe Elizabeth I is ever so slightly overhyped, in my opinion.
Ooh, okay. All right. All right. I like it. Now, before we dive further into your background as a historian and as a content creator, and of course, a future author in the works, is there a random fact about you that not a lot of people know?
I'm trying to think. When I was younger, so I'm 23 now, so when I was in primary school, so for me it was like 9, 10, we used to foster cats, and at one point we had 9 cats in our house. So we were literally like a zoo. It was like a petting zoo with the amount of cats that we had in our house.
Oh my gosh. I don't think I could ever do that. Fostering animal and also, cats. I'm allergic to cats. I would have been an absolute wreck.
Honestly, it was so hard saying like, bye cat, because it's like you just get so attached to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's awesome, Jessica. That is awesome. So going back to your bio again, you're in the process of getting a history degree while also doing all this incredible things from your podcast, Her Story, and also writing your first book for Pen and Sword. So I'm just curious. Let's start at the very beginning. What really got you invested in not only history, but specifically the Tudors?
Yeah, so I've always had a interest in history from a really young age. I used to love learning history at school. It was something that it was one of the topics I enjoyed most. English and history, art, they were my topics. I completely hate maths, science, so they were my topics at school. But specifically how I got into the Tudors is actually from my mum. So for anyone that's seen the HBO series The Tudors, when I was growing up, my mum was obsessed with that. But at the time when it came out, I was too young. I was like 5 when it came out, so I was not suitable to watch it. But when I got to about 13, 14, my mum was like, "You should watch this show," because I loved it when it came out. So I gave it a go, and it is wildly inaccurate, but I was obsessed with it. It was so good, and I loved the way it kind of brought the Tudors to life, but it also made me want to research them more because I kind of wanted to understand them better. And from then on, it's just kind of spiraled and spiraled. And then 10 years later, I'm still obsessed with the Tudors, and it's becoming my career.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that kind of leads into another set of fan questions, Jessica, because you touch on something that I actually talked with another colleague of mine who also specializes, on the Tudor reign in England. And they brought up the point that, of all the monarchs in, English history, the Tudors get a lot of light and a lot of media representation. I mean, you have Wolf Hall, you had the of course the Tudor series, and then of course you could call them like pre-Tudor series, but they are tied into the history, which is the White Queen and the White Princess, and then of course the Spanish Princess as well. All of these separate shows have all, tied themselves together to talk about the Tudors. But as impressive as their family is and their extended family, there are many other powerful kings and queens that existed in English history that are just as important. And yet, even in the modern day, we're so focused on the Tudors. In your opinion, Jessica, what is it about the Tudors that still captivates people, even though the shows may be wildly inaccurate to the source material?
I think we kind of relate to them a little bit. To me, they are a bit like, I don't know if anyone has heard of it, but EastEnders in the UK is one of our soap operas. And they are literally like a soap opera. There is so much drama going on, like no day is quiet for them. But I think another point as well is they don't feel that far away. Whereas I think
Mm.
sometimes the medieval period, it seems quite far away, and maybe we don't know as much about it. Whereas I think the Tudor era, when we start to get a really rich amount of sources, and we kind of see their daily lives better. So I think that's kind of where our obsession goes with it. And I think, as you say, the Tudors will fall. It brings them back into the forefront because we just can't stop being fascinated by them.
No, that is absolutely true. It is absolutely insane. And I even remember, I never watched it. I remember a lot of friends of mine were invested and obsessed with, the Tudors. And of course, the biggest thing that everyone remembers of the Tudors is, of course, the wives of Henry VIII. I mean, that's all anyone talks about is the many different wives, and also, the wife that he actually loved out of all of the women, and how things would have been so different had things gone this way, or if he stayed with the Spanish princess and she was able to have a son along with uh Mary and so forth. It's absolutely insane. But you are right, Jessica. I mean, the Tudors are not that far away in terms of like history when we
Yeah.
look back, as opposed to, the medieval kings like the Plantagenets, like John, Richard, and even the forefathers of the Plantagenets, like William of Normandy. I mean, all those kings are from the medieval area, but we don't know enough about them. The Tudors, we kind of do because there's more sources, there's more history about them. So, from that point, let's now jump ahead. So, how did you get into content creation and building your brand as a Tudor historian, and what you want to focus on as a Tudor historian?
So that's a brilliant question. So it's around the same time that I kind of really got into the Tudors. So I started my Instagram specifically on Holy Tudor in 2018. And I kind of did it to express my love for the Tudors, you know, kind of find a community, because my friends and family just aren't into the Tudors like I was. So I just a bit like, I've got no one to talk to about this. I'm completely alone in this Tudor rambling world of mine that I've developed. So I kind of wanted to show an interest, show love, but as I've got older, it's kind of, I also want to go to these places and I want to bring history alive for people, because I think it's really important to keep history alive and sacred, yet fun and informative. And I've kind of, that's what my platform has been about, is making history fun and informative. And it's not just a bunch of facts on a page that you go, okay, that's a lot of information. Like, for example, literally we've just had the downfall of Anne Boleyn month, and I've tried to condense the information into short bursts, and people have really engaged with that because it's not an overloading of information. So I've tried to make my page not boring, yet also I still want it to be informative. I don't want people to go, well, she's got that fact wrong. It's, you know, oh, we can't trust her. So I think
Right.
that's what it's been about for me. It's keeping history alive, mainly showing my passion for history. If I can go to the Tower of London, I'm going to bring you all with me, and you're going to feel like you're there, because I'm going to light a candle and you can all experience that for 30 seconds with me. So that's kind of what's been really important for me in this account, and being a content creator as well.
Excellent. So ultimately, this is almost like your promise and your goal that you set out for yourself when you created, Unholy Tutor, that you didn't want, history to be very similar to what, was taught in, primary school and secondary school. You want to show how it was, active and engaging, and how it is still very important in the modern age.
Yes, absolutely. I think when I was in high school and primary school, you would just be given a textbook and that's it, just kind of learn history out of a textbook. And I think that isn't really how history should be taught. I think, it should be a conversation with people, going like, what do you think of this historical figure? Or what do you think of this historical event? And for me, that's really important, because I think if my teachers made history more engaging, I think a lot more people would be interested in history today.
Absolutely, very true. I can wholeheartedly agree to that. And now I get into another fan question. I think you may have touched on this before, but one of my viewers would like to know, of the many figures you have researched for your content of the Tudor history and legacy, who is probably the most overhyped figure in the Tudors' reign, whether it's like a monarch or someone close to the monarch, and who is someone that is underappreciated in the Tudor lore?
I mean, I've already kind of said I think Elizabeth I is a little bit overhyped. I think sometimes Henry VIII gets overhyped a lot. We seem to focus on him a lot, which I'm not saying is a terrible thing. His reign is what we remember the most, but maybe we should focus on the people around him ever so slightly more. Who's underrated? Do you know what? I'm going to say for underrated for me is Mary I. I think Mary I gets a lot of hate. She gets slandered all the time. We don't seem to give her credit for surviving any of the horrors that her father gave her. She had a pretty normal childhood. Then Henry decides, no, I don't love your mother anymore. You're not really accepting that I want to marry Anne Boleyn. So you're going to be going to exile, and then you're going to serve my new child. And then she doesn't get to see her mother before her mum dies. And it's unimaginable trauma at such a young age, especially in her formative years. And again, I'm not justifying the things that happened in her reign, but I think we don't seem to see the full picture with Mary. We
Right.
only look at half the picture. Whereas with Elizabeth, and that is comparing them, we kind of go, well, look at Elizabeth first. She had such a tragic childhood. Her mother was executed. Why don't we give that same love and empathy to Mary? So I'm going to say for me, Mary's really underrated.
Nice, nice. And I think if I had to throw my hat in the ring, I figure who is underrated, and I'm actually trying to remember her name, and I think it was a year ago. She was part of the Stuart family who was queen, but just for a little while. Like no one really knows of her name. Like I think she was only queen for like 3 days, maybe a week at most. Oh gosh, why am I blanking on her name? Because again, no one really knows much about her, and she was just like a puppet. And sadly, she was executed. She was executed. Oh, I gotta find that name. I gotta find that name because it's gonna be bothering me for the rest of the day. But there are so many things about the Tudor lore that are overhyped because of the history tied to them, and actually, as you said, that are underappreciated, like an account of Mary, which you're absolutely correct, Jessica. When we think of Mary the First, we think of Bloody Mary. We think of who she was. We don't really consider that had things gone differently, had Henry, actually been a decent person and, helped his daughter and actually acknowledged Mary as his daughter instead of trying to have a son with Anne Boleyn, the history of England would be greatly, greatly altered. For better or for worse, that remains to be seen.
No, absolutely. I think there are so many figures in Tudor history that you could be like, oh, do you know what? They're not talked about enough. Like I didn't discover, but maybe I've appreciated her more. Catherine Carey. She's the daughter of Mary Boleyn. She's currently the subject of Alison Ware's new novel, so that's where I kind of have learned more about it. And she's such a fascinating woman, and it's like, do you know what? That's someone else in the Tudor period that I maybe didn't think about, but we should, because she was utterly brilliant for that time period.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now let's talk a little bit more about your schedule as a content creator. Now, do you consider yourself to be more of like a morning person, a night owl in terms of like, gathering research, planning and everything in terms of, outlining what posts get up or what the post is going to be? Or are you more of like a spontaneous person?
I do quite like a schedule. I'm not going to lie. I have a diary that I write my schedule in. I have to be scheduled or I start to get a bit panicky. That that is me to a T. In terms of content, I try to split it up. So I've just come back from a trip in York, and I'm trying not to just dump all the places that I've been. So I'm trying to do, this is what I've done, then try and do an informative post, and then maybe do another one again. Because I also do a lot of book reviews, so it's trying to split it all. So I try to usually do informative book review, and then if I've been somewhere, that's usually either in the middle or after one of them posts as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I finally just now just looked back really quick of that family. I was actually mistaken. It wasn't the Stewarts, it was the Greys.
Lady Jane Grey, yeah,
Yes,
love her.
yes, she was the young unknown queen for a few years of the Grey family. Yes, now I found it. But yeah, her story, viewers and listeners, is ultimately very, very tragic. And again, just another example of, people getting caught in the crosshairs of the Tudors and everything like that. So, as you mentioned earlier, Jessica, that your family's not as, heavily invested in like the Tudors history as you are, but I'm very curious. When did you tell your family and friends that you were embarking on this journey of yours to build, a brand as a Tudor historian on the internet in the midst of, getting a history degree?
So when I kind of said I can't envisage me sitting in an office or standing in a shop, which I'm not slating, it's both brilliant career paths. This is my thing. This is where I feel I excel at, and I'm really comfortable in it. And at first, everyone was a bit like okay, but as time's gone on, to be honest, they've been really supportive, and they see how much I love it, and they enjoy watching me enjoy it, and they all now say like, yeah, we can't imagine you doing anything else because history is quite clearly your life. So I'm really lucky that my family have been incredibly supportive in this journey for me, because I couldn't have asked for better.
That's awesome, Jessica. That is absolutely awesome. And now, before we get into what I call the reflective side, let's tackle some of the icebreaker questions for this round. Now, as you and I know, being content creators, there are going to be some days we're going to have some blank moments. We're going to have some writer's block. We're going to have some imposter syndrome. How do you deal with both?
So I feel like I deal with imposter syndrome on a daily basis. I'm like, what am I doing here? What's going on? I don't fit in. I think I tell myself that this is where you're happiest. And, every day isn't going to be perfect. As you say, like, we have writer's block, or we're like, God, I don't know how to talk about this historic event or historic person. I think usually for me, I will take a step back, turn the laptop off, because there's no point just staring at it and just getting more frustrated. So I step back, I either listen to some music or I sit with my dogs, because they're usually good for pondering on many thoughts. So I think to deal with writer's block, it's definitely step away, because I think if you just stay in that, well, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to do, it's not going to get any better. So for me, the best thing is to step away and maybe not think about it for a moment, maybe think about something else, or read a book, or watch a TV series for half an hour. Because for me, it's, don't get stuck in the mindset of I can't do it, I can't do this, because you're very much needed in the space, in the community. It's just how you make your mark, and you don't compare yourself to others. Don't go, well, that person gets invited to this, or this person's got this free book, or this. You are doing your own excellent thing, and that's what you should focus on. Like, for the imposter syndrome especially, it's like, you're doing your thing and you're your happiest. Carry on doing what you do best.
Excellent. Well said, Jessica. Well said. So now let's dive into what I like to call the reflective side of being historians, content creators, and of course, down the road, an author. And to start off, this is a very loaded question, Jessica, so embrace yourself. The industry in the field has greatly changed. You're seeing a lot of content creators on YouTube, on Spotify, who are passionate about history, who are making their own niches, whether it's, Tudor history, women's history, forgotten history, or probably a combination of all three and more. You have history on war, history on battles, history on warrior kings, food, culture, medicine, even. There is a lot. But also in the digital age, we're also seeing, unfortunately, a rise of misinformation when it comes to history, which is unfortunate. And you're also seeing a rise in what I've been seeing in the industry, and from what my colleagues have been noting, as the rise of armchair historians. Now, for those that are unfamiliar with that term, the best summary I can give is, or I should say, those who are passionate about history but may not have the formal academic training, such as others who have done the research, who have gone through, schooling, university, to get all the information, to know how to approach sources. Now, I just want to say I have met many history buffs, many podcasters who are incredible, who would fall under that category of armchair historians, who are very much very close and similar to classically trained historians. But that term has often been used more recently, unfortunately, to be very negative in the sense of, well, they're not, really historians because they have no academic backing to them. So, Jessica, I'm just very curious. When we also look at your podcast, Herstory, which is focused on, forgotten history in the world, what has still disciplined you to pursue this and work hard on this? Because I also had a chance to listen to a few episodes of Herstory, and you do a lot of research. You are definitely showing that you're passionate about the history. You're not going to make it boring. You're going to make it exciting. So what has still disciplined you to create this content that you are passionate about in an age where there is misinformation and there is that kind of negative stigma for those that may be perceived as armchair historians?
So, firstly, thank you for your kind words about the podcast. That means a lot. I love researching. So for me, it's a fun evening spent researching a podcast episode, because when I'm very privileged to talk to historians such as Tracy Borman or Owen Emerson,
Mm-hmm.
I need to know everything. I don't want to turn up and be like, what was that date or fact again? Which theoretically doesn't really matter because it's meant to be a conversation between two people. But for me, I think if you're at least got a basic knowledge of what you're going into with the episode, you also will enjoy the episode more because you feel more comfortable speaking to the other person. And it's, as you said about armchair historians, I think obviously a lot of misinformation is starting to see a rise. A lot of people do take the Tudors TV show as fact, or Philippa Gregory's books as fact, and not fiction. Because again, you can enjoy these things for fiction, they just aren't fact. I think when I do episodes as well, I will recommend books or the books the person has done. Or if I do a information reel on Instagram, I will say, these are the books that I've used to obtain this information. Because I think it's, if you recommend stuff to other people, they can then go away and do their own research and rely on the actual historians and the sources they have used. Whereas, again, I love Wikipedia. I think it's a really great starting point. But again, it sometimes gets it wrong. And I think it's, for me, the balance of the episode is, I like a structured episode. So for me, I like it quite set. But also, I love researching. So for me, it's like, well, I've read the book, so I can make some notes off the book that I've just read. But I would say for misinformation as well, because I don't know if you've seen it, Gabriel, but a lot of nastiness has started to come in when people get things wrong.
Yes.
And there's no constructive criticism anymore. I think the social media needs to be a little bit kinder to people that don't have a degree, because it doesn't mean you're not qualified if you've spent years researching in that profession. I haven't got my degree yet, so technically I'm not qualified. But I think a lot of it is trusting other people and also backing up yourself. It's kind of like, I've got dozens of shelves behind me with books. It's doing the research yourself. Don't always go, well, I've learned it off this social media page. Always double check, because even if they've only got something slightly wrong, you may never then change your opinion because you've took this person at their absolute word. So I think it's do the research yourself, because then you'll get the full picture.
Absolutely. Well said. Jessica, well said. And that kind of ties into another question, and that is, of course, this era that we are in. Now, as you mentioned earlier, your journey began back in 2018, correct?
Yes.
So you were definitely before, the rise of, COVID and, the pandemic and all of that. And that definitely did change the industry and platforms and podcasts altogether. I mean, during the quarantine alone, you had the rise of so many different podcasts, so many different content creators. And I definitely think that was a way to, build one's brand and definitely network and connect. I myself created the show, The Wandering Scribe, out of, the pandemic. And it's been going on for the last, 6, 7 years, which is absolutely insane. But I digress. This has sparked whether or not, because of the pandemic and because of quarantine isolation, have we reached an era of, content creation with new voices? Or are we slowly teetering in what I like to call a cyber dark age, with that being referred to the rise of generative AI, whether it's scripts, whether it's video content, or unfortunately, written content and refers to books. So, Jessica, I would like to hear your thoughts on this, and also tying it into, your upcoming work with Pen and Sword, as well as your podcast and what you have made on Instagram.
So, as you say, there's been such a rise in AI, and I've seen a lot of stuff on social media of where the person kind of go back in time, and they're like they're with Anne Boleyn the night before her execution, and I think, to be honest, it's really scary for me.
Mm,
I think it's utterly terrifying. I mean, I'm in my 20s, but I find it scary that we seem to be relying more and more on robotics and artificial intelligence, and that we want it to do our work for us. I I don't want to be in a world personally where we don't rely on our own intellect anymore. I am where I am personally, and it's not to be big-headed, because of my own research and the work that I've done. I don't want to rely on a computer to go, oh yeah, can you just chum out this script for me? I think it's okay now and then to be like, can you just make sure there's no typos in my work? I think stuff like that is okay, but I think to generate content formally off AI is kind of lazy. It
mm-hmm,
really is. I think if you're passionate about something, this shouldn't feel like hard work. This should be something that you are enjoying. And that my podcast is, I did it off my own back. I've had incredible people on, and it's all about authenticity. It really is. It's two people having a conversation about a subject they really love and enjoy, and it's boosting everyone's intellect because they're getting to learn more. I honestly really think the world is turning a bit scary. I honestly do, and I think it's even more important for content creators to keep everything authentic, because we are the ones that are giving people this platform and information. So I really think we need to kind of unite against AI almost.
mm-hmm. Absolutely. 100% agree, Jessica. And this kind of goes now into what I call the business side of being an historian. So now let's turn tables and talk about your upcoming novel with Pen and Sword about Mary and Elizabeth. So I know you probably can't give us a lot of details because you want to keep something secret, rightly so. But as a teaser, can you tell us what really inspired you to choose these two figures as your main focus for your first book? And what can we expect in your novel that might be slightly different or maybe an elevation from previous works?
So I'm currently writing a biography on Elizabeth and Mary I and their relationship. And without giving too much away, I am kind of reevaluating their relationship completely. I think we've been fed this story of that they hate each other, that they don't get along, and look, Mary put Elizabeth in the tower, so they must really not have liked each other. Whereas kind of in my research, I actually found there's quite a softer relationship, that they're actually quite fond of each other. And trying not to give it too much away, but basically things only really go wrong during Mary's reign, and I explore a lot of factors as to why that relationship goes wrong, and it's not necessarily Mary or Elizabeth's fault either.
Fascinating. All right, all right. Now, as you are writing this biography about these two women, I think it's also very important to discuss that, when we look at the audience for biographies, absolutely, of course, the people who are probably going to pick up this book are fans of the Tudors, probably from the shows, or fans of Philippa Gregory. But I think it is important to note that since this book is very, historical, it is nonfiction, it is a biography. It's this balancing of the two where you want to showcase your voice, Jessica, as the author and historian, but also keep in mind the audience that you're writing for. Now, you are writing for a more, I wouldn't say an academic audience per se, because I imagine you're writing this book to be accessible to everybody. But you can't also help but realize there is a secret group, which is, of course, fans of, the Tudor series and fans of Philippa Gregory, who have read books like The White Queen and The White Princess and so forth. So for you as an author, how do you balance the two to showcase both sides?
So I've actually found this quite difficult because I don't want to be like over explaining everything, because you don't want to patronize people, but you don't then want to under explain what you're talking about, because then people are like, well, actually, I don't really know the context or the background surrounding this. So it's been a real fine line of trying to not patronize or over explain or overburden with facts, and also not under explain it. So I've tried to make my book so far, because I'm still writing it, kind of conversational. So kind of like a discussion, whilst also giving you the facts. And I've tried to not insert my bias into it. So I'm trying not to be overly opinionative on Mary or Elizabeth. Well, maybe Henry. I might be slightly opinionated about him in the book. I won't lie. That I've not been kind. We'll say that. The spoiler. I've not been generous towards Henry in this non-fiction biography. But I think, because again, I've read Philippa Gregory's books. I loved them. They were historical fiction. They're an escape. I think with biographies, it is just a real fine line of making sure people understand the facts or enjoy what they're reading, because it's a different perspective.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned earlier in the episode that you, when it comes to making your content for your Instagram, you also reference books or refer to books that have been very helpful, that are good focal points to learn more about either events, figures, or just, something close to the Tudors family. Now, when you're writing this book, or I should say, still writing this book, what would you say are like the top 3 books that are essential to you as an historian and researcher?
For this book specifically, I loved using Young Elizabeth by Dr. Nicola Tallis, which is a biography completely on Elizabeth from birth to just before queenship. And it's been so helpful trying to understand Elizabeth and her youth much better. Like, it's so rich in detail, so like that's been perfect. Another one is Mary Tudor by Anna Whitelock, which again is another fantastic biography on Mary. It's more not softer, but it's more nuanced in Mary. It's kind of, which for me is perfect, and it's been great for research. And then what's another one that I've loved? Because there's been so many that I've used. Actually, I would say I can't remember the exact title of it, but it's a biography by Dr. Lauren Mackay about Eustace Shapway. And I've kind of used him for research purposes because of all his testimonials and everything he writes to the emperor, because he has such good observational skills that he, for me, really helped contextualize the Tudor court on a European scale. So for me, his biography is excellent. I'm trying to think what it's called. It's possibly Inside the Tudor Court, but it's about Eustace Shapway. It's honestly so brilliant because he's so interesting as well. So it's kind of, he's great. But as I say, to kind of understand what Henry's actions look like abroad really helps me broaden my view on that period.
Awesome. Now, kind of tie into that, who would you say have been, your top biggest supporters on social media, whether they are fellow Tudor historians, fellow content creators, or just like-minded people that you've made friendships with, who have helped you on your journey?
So I've met so many wonderful people across the years, but I first and foremost have to thank the Catherine Parr Society, who I met a few years ago. She's my best friend. I'm so lucky to have her. She's honestly utterly wonderful. But I've also been very lucky in historian support as well. Like Professor Tracy Borman has been so generous to me with her time and helping me along in my career. The same with Dr. Owen Emerson as well, who is a gem of a person. Honestly, he is so kind. But as well, Anna Tudor Tales from Tudor Tales, she's brilliant, and if you don't follow her, her content is incredible. I'm trying to think anyone else. Content. To be honest, the Anne Boleyn Society as well. He is wonderful. James is like the nicest person on social media, possibly. But I think over the years, these are the people that have helped me the most, I would say.
Awesome. Awesome, Jessica. Now, as we are reaching the end, there are a few final questions that I did want to ask you. And this is another fan question. And this probably is one of my favorite fan questions. So let's imagine this. Let's say your book's been published, you're on a book tour, and you are approached by somebody who works in the entertainment industry in England. They give you two big choices to adapt your book. First choice is let's go with a biographical movie trilogy about Mary and Elizabeth, and each movie focuses on their tentative years. First movie is about their young years, second is their teenage, adolescent years, and the third and final film is about when they are adults and when they, come into their own as queens. Second option is a limited series, 3 seasons, same premise. And in both options, you get the choice of who you want to play as Elizabeth and Mary, and choice of directors. Which would you choose?
Oh, that's an amazing question. Who would I pick? I think for Mary, I can't remember her exact name, but do you know the actress that plays Mary in Becoming Elizabeth? Is it Romola Garai?
I think so, yes.
I think she was honestly brilliant. So I feel like I would need her back for Mary because she was perfect. Maybe Karen Gillan as well.
Ooh,
Because
that's a good choice.
she's perfect, I think. trying to think. Yeah, I think Karen Gillan maybe for either Mary or Elizabeth. Definitely Romola back. I don't know who I'd want to direct it. I'd need someone that would keep in the artistic flair, but also all the facts, because it drives me mad when some facts are taken out of historical dramas.
Absolutely, very true. If I also had to throw my hat in this hypothetical, for me, I think the one who people said that she did a very good performance because she looks, very close to the Virgin Queen was definitely Margot Robbie, and I think that was with Mary Queen of Scots. That story, Kate Blanchett as Elizabeth, that will always be like the highlight because she brought that character to life. But definitely Margot Robbie's a good one. But yeah, director, that'll be tough. That is a very, very tough because you also have to think of, well, how are you actually going to present the story? Because as you said, Jessica, your book, with your biographical book, is a re-examination of their lives and how they may not have been enemies or rivals growing up, but something down the line, something would have had to have changed that relationship.
I'm trying to think, who would I? No, it's so hard, but I don't know how I'd get him in there, but I'd need David Tennant to play someone somewhere.
Oh, yes. David Tennant would be, he's a must. I remember him from the Mary Queen of Scots movie. He was very, very good. And then, of course, you would have to get somebody to be of, who leads Wolf Hall. You would definitely need someone for that. Guy Pearce,
Yeah.
I know, definitely played, I think it was what, Cromwell of Wolf Hall? Or was that someone else?
Mark Rylance is Wolf Hall.
Okay.
Thomas
Cromwell, that's him. Yeah, that's tough.
It's so hard. I mean, like, because for Henry VIII, I don't know how I'd top the actors that have played him. Honestly, I wouldn't. I mean, I love Damien Lewis as Henry VIII. I think he's great. I'm trying to think who. I mean, I'd just love to say David Tennant just so I can have him in my production of whatever.
That's true.
Just David Tennant, just any male role, it's David Tennant.
Yeah, I mean, you had Jonathan Rhys, who definitely brought the Henry VIII to life, and then you also have the newest Tudor, the newest Henry VIII, who was in Wolf Hall, who was in Band of Brothers. For those who may not remember, he kind of looks the closest just because of his beard.
Yeah, I mean, the other one that I would say, obviously, he sadly passed away, but if anyone remembers Keith Michelle, who played Henry VIII in the 1970s in the Six Wives of Henry VIII TV series, where it's each episode on each wife, and then 2 years later, he does a Henry VIII and his Six Wives film with Charlotte Rampling as Anne Boleyn.
Ooh.
He was so good as Henry VIII. I'm trying to think. I think for director, maybe someone from Wolf Hall, because I feel like they got the aspect of like fact and fiction really well.
Absolutely. And before we move on, I think I know of a good actor who could probably play Henry VIII in this hypothetical film or TV series. And it's the actor who played Robert Baratheon in Game of Thrones.
Oh, actually, do you know what? That's quite a good shout. I think he would be good as Henry VIII.
Absolutely. And, oh yes, which medium would you have chosen? Film or limited series?
I think maybe a limited series. I think maybe he could do more of like a docudrama to a series. So I could have a historian kind of telling the information while then we get to see it play out as well. I think for me, that'd be perfect.
Absolutely, 100%. I definitely think that'll be a good route to go. Because docudramas are really well made, really well done. There are so many good docudramas. And that'll be a very good and interesting, take on Elizabeth and for Mary to, kind of bring a little bit more truth to light as opposed to just retelling the same story that we've been constantly fed over the years about their relationship. And I definitely think your story could definitely add some new conversation to, these two women of the Tudor age who are powerful in their own right, who, in a way, you could argue are tragic characters in some regard. And it also just, brings up this question of how come we may vilify one sister but find redemption in the other when both women had to do some very terrible things during their reign, but we view one as a villain and the other as a savior.
The major thing is Mary was Catholic, and Catholics got utterly villainized before Mary's reign, and without putting too much blame on Mary, the actions during her reign sets it even further against Catholics. Whereas 20 years earlier, we could not imagine a Protestant leading our country. It completely changes in 20 years from 1536. The major thing is, I think, is Mary is a Catholic, Elizabeth was a Protestant, and for me, that's why we see redemption in Elizabeth, because, look, she brought the true religion back to the country, whereas Mary tried to oppress the country. We use such negative language surrounding Mary, when in her mind, she's just bringing back the religion that kept the country secure for hundreds of years.
That's true. That is very, very true. And that could be a whole discussion of itself, that if you really think about it, the change from Catholicism to Protestantism in English history is not that old. It's not that old if you really do think about it. Maybe less than maybe 300, 400 years. That's not that far off in the grand scheme of things.
No, not at all. I mean, it's crazy to me, because I was talking about this with someone the other day, that in 1688, so James II, we got rid of a Catholic monarch because we didn't want that. We just didn't want that. And then he had a son, and it was like, oh my God, no, get rid of him. Whereas if it was 100 years prior or earlier, with Tim or Henry's reign, we would be utterly appalled. We'd be like, what do you mean that we're not with the Pope and we're now Protestant and the King is the head of the Church of England? It's such a crazy turn of events, but also that literally in the 17th century, we have Charles I is executed because he's too much of an absolute monarch. But all of the actions that Henry VIII did, we had a few uprisings, but nothing in comparison to Charles I. I think it shows how much history changes in such a short amount of time, because we could not imagine Henry VIII surviving now if he was in the 17th century.
Absolutely not. Absolutely. Could be another discussion for another episode of that. If you look at the comparative reigns of Charles I and Henry VIII too. So with that said, Jessica, as we wrap up this incredible interview, at the end of the day, what do you want people to take away from your work as an historian, a podcaster, and a future author?
I think I'd like people to take away my passion for history foremost, and also that I hope they kind of enjoy learning with me, because every day's a learning curve. I learn something new every day. I mean, I barely knew anything about Catherine Carey, and now it's like I need to know everything about her. And I think as well, I love people to enjoy my podcast episodes as well and be like, that was a great conversation and I want to learn more from this historian or follow that historian's work. I kind of want history to be a conversation that everyone is enjoying.
Well said, Jessica. Well said. And on that note, viewers and listeners, we conclude this amazing historian interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Want to give a huge thank you to Jessica for coming on the show, making her official debut, and hopefully not the last time we see her on the channel. Now, Jessica, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out and connect and stay up to date with the future release of your pen and sword book.
Yes, so thank you so much for having me. It's been a utter pleasure. You can find me on Instagram as on Holly Tudor. I'm also on Substack, where I post more in-depth history and book reviews, but again, Unholy Tudor. I'm also on TikTok, again, spoiler, Unholy Tudor. I'm Unholy Tudor on everything. But the podcast you can find on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music. It's wherever you can find a podcast, I'll be on there. It's Herstory. So please follow and let's talk about history.
I will link all that down below in the description of this video, viewers and listeners. And if you'd like to see Jessica back on the show in a follow-up episode, or maybe an episode of the Historians Lounge series, you know you have to do. Like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. Until then, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, signing out. Wish you all a wonderful morning or evening, wherever you are in the world. And another huge thank you to Jessica for coming on the show. We wish her the very best. And as always, we will see you all in the next episode. Take care and have a wonderful day.